Chapter 7 from the NASA Procedures for Contact with Intelligent Extraterrestrial Life Manual, Hoaxes and Misunderstandings. In the case of any contact with IEL, you must be alert to the possibility that it is not true contact at all. In the great majority of cases, any reports of IEL will turn out to be false. Sometimes those who report IEL will be doing so as a hoax or jest, as they mistakenly believe that such behavior is funny, although the far greater likelihood is that the reports will be in earnest, but will be cases of overzealousness. Therefore, it is paramount to respond to all potential cases of IEL with a healthy skepticism. Seeds of Doom, Lunar Day 252, breakfast time. The greenhouse was located directly across from the mess hall, which allowed us to grab breakfast while casing the place. Normally, I wasn't a big fan of breakfast at MBA, or any meal there really, but since I had already been awake for a few hours, save for my brief nap, I was hungry enough to eat, space food. I made myself some reconstituted banana pancakes and a hot tea. Since it's basically dried leaves and water, tea was one of the few things at MBA that didn't vary much from its Earth version. In the mess, Dr. Iwanyi sat at the table with Kemoze, while most of the Brahmaputra Marquez family was at another. Only Roddy was missing, probably off making his case to Nina, as he'd threatened. None of the other adults were there. They were all at their workstations already. The entire Schoberg family was absent as well. Lars had been released from the medical bay, and now all the Swedes were holed up in their suite, as usual. Mom and Dad were seated at one of the big tables, almost done eating. They obviously expected Violet and me to sit with them, so we did, and Kira joined us as her father was nowhere to be seen. "Don't tell Mom and Dad about the apple seeds," I warned Violet on the way to our table. "It's a secret." "Okay," Violet said through a mouthful of blueberry muffin-like substance. She seemed very excited to have a secret with Kira and me. "What took you guys so long to get here?" Mom asked as we sat down. "Did you guys get lost?"
"We can't get lost here, Mom," Violet replied, missing the joke. "It's way too small. We were playing a prank on Roddy with Kira."
"Oh?" Mom arched an eyebrow. "What sort of prank?"
"We attacked him with unicorns and sparkle power,"
Violet exclaimed, and then launched into an explanation of what we'd done. While Kira helped her tell the story, leaving out the part about our investigation, I observed the greenhouse from my seat. The room was glass on two sides and stretched all the way to the top of MBA, where it had a glass roof as well. An extremely thick, meteor-proof glass roof for safety's sake. For our first 6 months, the greenhouse hadn't been very green at all. The plants hadn't been growing nearly as well as we'd hoped. However, Dr. Goldstein had recently had some breakthroughs. Even though the Schobergs had greedily raided the greenhouse 4 weeks earlier, the plants had rebounded nicely. There were clumps of red strawberries and quite a few cherry tomatoes on the vine. The sugar snap peas were doing particularly well. In the low lunar gravity, they had rocketed up the stray wires toward the skylight, creating a curtain of greenery along the grass. Behind it, I could see Dr. Goldstein tending to her garden. "Sorry our catch this morning got caught short," Dad whispered to me. Kira and Violet were so busy telling Mom their story that he felt it was safe to say this without being overheard. "It's okay," I assured him. "Thanks for even taking me out." "Well, so you know, I took care of our spacesuits. I got all the dust off and moved them into the lockers." "Thanks." Dad hesitated a moment, as though he wasn't completely convinced that he wanted to say the next thing, but then went on with it. "While I was in the airlock at 4:30 in the morning, I saw you coming out of Nina's quarters." I gagged on my pancakes, partly caught off guard by Dad's statement and partly because I'd hit a poorly rehydrated chunk of banana. "Do you want to tell me what you were doing in there?" Dad pressed. I glanced back at the girls. They were still telling their story. Violet was being extremely animated, acting out her part as well as that of the Merkmoid and the unicorns. She had attracted the attention of everyone else in the mess hall. "Well, Nina told me what really happened with Lars," I confided to Dad, "that it wasn't an accident." Dad's eyes widened in surprise and then narrowed as he realized what was going on. Did she ask you to help investigate this? Yes, I admitted. I can't believe she would do that, Dad said angrily. I know you've solved some crimes here, but you're only 13 years old, and that's only as of today. Whoever did this is dangerous. I don't want you getting involved. Chang and I can handle it. Our Dad trailed off as he put two and two together. Oh, crud. She suspects Chang or I might have done it. Well, she only mentioned Chang. Well, she wouldn't have told you that she suspects your own father. Even Nina's human enough to realize that wouldn't go over well. Violet wrapped up her story with a grand reenactment of the Merkmoid's death, dramatically collapsing to the floor. All the Moonies in the mess hall applauded. I considered asking Dad if he thought Chang could have done it, but I was pretty sure he would be upset at me for even thinking it. And while I waffled on the issue, Dad got up from the table. I'm going to take care of this right now, he said, and then started toward Nina's residence. Where are you going? Mom asked, startled by Dad's sudden departure. To talk to Nina, Dad replied, and then hurried on without an explanation. Violet took her seat at the table and dug into her muffin again. She seemed a bit winded from the exertion of telling her story. Mom's watch pinged, signaling she had received a message. She glanced at it and then stood herself. I've got a call from Earth in a few minutes, she told us. I need to prepare for it. Dash, Kira, can I trust you two to get Violet and yourselves to school on time? Of course, Kira agreed. Although it is Dash's birthday, maybe letting him get to school late would be a nice present? No, Mom said curtly. Your teachers take a great deal of time to prepare your lessons, and if you three show up late, that's disrespectful. So please be on time today. We will, I said, fully intending to keep my word.
Hug first,
Violet announced, opening her arms wide. Mom hugged her tightly and then gave me a peck on the cheek and hurried off toward the science pod. Her behavior struck me as odd. Mom had calls with Earth all the time, but she seemed unusually uptight about this one, as well as being unusually concerned about when we got to school. Quite often, when Mom was in charge of getting Violet to class, they rolled in a few minutes late, even though we only lived 30 seconds away from school. Still, I might not have really noticed this if it hadn't been the latest in a string of odd behavior by the adults this morning. Or if all the other adults in the mess hadn't gotten up to leave at the exact same time. At the other tables, Drs. Iwanyi, Marquez, and Brahmaputra Marquez were all saying goodbye to their children and heading off to the science pod as well, which made me think that Mom wasn't the only one who had just received an important message. In addition, they were all very insistent that the kids had to be in school on time. Dr. Iwanyi asked Cesar Marquez to make sure Camoze got there, and then rapped on the glass of the greenhouse to get his wife's attention and pointed at his watch. Dr. Goldstein quickly scrubbed some soil off her hands, exited the greenhouse, and headed to the science pod with her husband. Do you get the sense that something strange going on here? I asked Kira. You mean stranger than Lars Sjoberg being poisoned? She replied. In addition to Lars Sjoberg being poisoned, I said. Has your father been acting weird lately? My father's always acting weird. Well, weirder than usual. I can't even imagine what that would be like. Kira watched Dr. Goldstein and Iwanyi disappear into the science pod. Now that there were no more adults around, she snapped to her feet and started for the greenhouse. What are you doing? I asked, starting after her. What do you think I'm doing? Kira answered. I'm going to go look for apple seeds.
Yeah, Violet chimed in, tailing us. We're looking for apple seeds.
We're not going to get a better chance than this, Kira said. All the adults are probably going to be on that call a while. Before I could even start to argue that my father didn't want me investigating anymore, Kira already had the door open and was inside the greenhouse. Violet followed her, so I went in too. I hadn't been in the greenhouse in a few weeks, and it was supposed to be off limits to kids. The moment I stepped inside, I was overwhelmed. There wasn't a great deal of greenery, but I still hadn't been around this much of it since I'd been back on Earth. Everything was wonderful and intoxicating. The smell of flowers and the soil, the variety of colors in the flowers and fruits, the mere sense of being surrounded by living things. It made me realize how sterile and drab the rest of Moonbase Alpha was. It also made me more homesick than ever. I found myself longing for Earth, missing the great grass fields and thick rainforests of Hawaii. Violet and Kira seemed equally awestruck. They froze in their tracks, taking in the sights and smelling the air.
This is so cosmic, Violet exclaimed. It's like being in a terrarium.
A sudden knocking on the glass snapped us all back to reality. Cesar Marquez was glaring at us through the window. Behind him, Camoze and Inez were still finishing their breakfasts. "What are you doing in there?" Cesar demanded. "Stealing food?" Kira put a finger to her lips, signaling for him to be quiet before the adults heard, and then pointed at the door. Cesar stormed inside, leaving Camoze and Inez in the mess hall. "This food is for everyone," he informed us, "not just you." He seemed completely unmoved by the experience of being around all the plants.
We're not stealing it, you dodo, Violet told him. We're only looking for apple seeds.
"I'm no dodo," Cesar responded, and then frowned in confusion. "What do you want apple seeds for?" "It's a school project," Kira lied. "We're studying the life cycle of the apple tree." "Really?" Cesar asked, now sounding upset. "I don't get to do anything cool like that. All I have is algebra all the time. Like that's ever going to come in handy." Cesar, I said, "this whole moon base wouldn't exist without algebra." "Yeah, right," Cesar said, as if I was trying to trick him. Kira and Violet were now moving through the greenhouse on the hunt for the apple seeds. Luckily, Dr. Goldstein was intensely organized. Or perhaps MBA guidelines had stipulated an extremely organized system. Space travel often requires such anal retentiveness. The plants were all growing in raised beds, tables with the deep pockets for soil in the top. Underneath the beds were storage units full of drawers of various sizes. Each was neatly labeled to indicate what was inside: gardening implements, fertilizer, spare parts for the irrigation system, and...
What's excrement? Violet asked.
Kira, Cesar, and I all looked at the large storage unit where she was pointing, and sure enough, there was a nice clear label on it. Excrement. Cesar started laughing. "It's poop," I said. Cesar laughed even harder.
Poop? Violet repeated. What kind of poop?
"Probably ours," Kira replied. Violet's face contorted in disgust.
"Oh, quoth, what's it doing in here?"
"It helps the plants grow," I explained. "The soil on the moon is really lousy." "Well, it's not really soil at all," Kira interrupted, continuing to search the greenhouse. "Moon dust is really mostly silica, which is a kind of glass created by meteor impacts." "It is?" Cesar asked, astonished. "You've been on the moon 8 months," Kira said. "Haven't you learned anything about it?" "Well, I know it's old," Cesar said defensively. "Like millions of years old." "Yeah, try billions, you Nimrod," Kira muttered under her breath. "Anyhow," I said quickly before Cesar could take offense, "plants don't really grow in silica, so we had to bring soil from Earth, only soil is super heavy. And it still needs some fertilizer, so I guess Dr. Goldstein realized we were creating an awful lot of fertilizer ourselves." Cesar couldn't help himself. He opened the storage unit and then wrinkled his nose in disgust. "That psycho put all of our poop in bags." The rest of us peered into the storage bin, and sure enough, all of our poop was bagged. There were dozens of small, opaque white plastic sacks, and each was helpfully labeled MBA human excrement and stamped with a date. "Dr. Goldstein didn't bag all our poop like this," Kira informed Cesar. "The space toilet does that." "Why?" Cesar asked, still disgusted. "Well, I guess so we can bring it back in here and use it on the plants," Kira said, "and possibly because if it wasn't bagged, it might contaminate the moon." "Or stink," I suggested. I had never seen what happened to our poop after it disappeared in the toilet. The bags were all packed full and then sealed tight, thankfully. There was a plastic zipper built into each, similar to that on a Ziploc bag, so that it could be reopened, probably for ease of getting the contents out to mix with the plants. Violet poked at one experimentally. It appeared firm under her touch, indicating that the water had been removed. and almost certainly recycled into our water supply.
Why do they have to say excrement? She asked. Why not just poop?
Because maybe excrement sounds more scientific, I guessed. I really had no idea. Or maybe because everyone at NASA has excrement for brains, Cesar said, and Violet giggled. I picked up one of the bags just to check it out. Although it was small enough to fit in a pocket of my cargo shorts, it was packed pretty solid. It probably had dozens of dehydrated poops crammed inside, meaning it represented the digested meals of multiple Moonies. The toilet system simply filled the bags with poop and then automatically sealed the old ones and slotted fresh ones into place. And yet, without the water, it didn't weigh that much, only about 2 pounds. Here we go, Kira exclaimed triumphantly. Seeds. At the far end of the greenhouse from the entrance, beneath a planting bed full of snap pea vines and tomato plants, was a storage unit filled with long, flat, shallow drawers. The top one was labeled fruits, while the bottom two were labeled vegetables. I replaced the bag of poop and then joined Kira as she slid the top drawer open. There were thousands of seeds inside, possibly tens of thousands, organized by type in airtight containers, each of which had been labeled as well. Many represented fruits Dr. Goldstein hadn't even tried growing yet. Perhaps she hadn't had the time or space. Perhaps they were being stored for the larger greenhouse that would be part of Moonbase Beta. There were seeds for watermelons, cantaloupes, strawberries, kiwis, mangoes, papayas, guavas, grapes, lemons, limes, kumquats, tomatoes, and cucumbers. Dr. Goldstein, being a botanist, had put the last two, tomatoes and cucumbers, where they belonged scientifically, instead of with the vegetables. Here we go, Kira said. Apples. She grabbed the container out of the drawer. Cesar started laughing when he saw it. Ha! Looks like you're going to have to do a different science project. The container was empty. All of the apple seeds were gone.